Bret the Hitman Hart, the best there is, the best there was, the best there ever will be. Eric, I know that he is your all-time favorite wrestler.
Yes.
He is my number 2. He is a close number 2. Whoops, I did not mean to do that. Sorry, I'm still getting smooth with the the transitions here on the live stream. But yeah, he's my number 2. My all-time favorite is Bret the Hitman Hart. Bret is my number 1, but I'm sorry, Macho Man Randy Savage. I'm trying to do too many things at once. Macho Man Randy Savage is my all-time favorite, but Bret is a very close number 2. Love Bret Hart.
You could have done the photo of Bret and I. You could have.
Oh, I could have.
Yeah, we didn't even think about that.
Is that? Can I find that quickly on your Facebook?
It's my profile pic, so you should be able to find it very quickly.
Oh, cool. I will put that up. I will put that up.
Yeah. That is definitely like, oh man. I thought meeting William Shatner was the end all be all for me. Like that moment where if I died right now, I'd be cool. Bret Hart trumped that.
Yeah.
Yeah, it just, he really is. Have you ever heard the explanation of why he is the best there is, the best there was, the best there ever will be?
I just assumed it was a cool catchphrase.
No, there's a story behind it.
I did not know that.
He says that because in his 20-plus year career, he never missed a house. He only missed one house show.
Okay.
Due to his own negligence, not due to injury, due to a travel issue.
Okay.
That was his fault. He never injured an opponent in the ring.
That I knew. Yep.
And he never, ever left before the end of the show.
Oh, okay.
He stayed till the very end.
Okay.
So that's why he calls himself that.
Oh, okay. That makes sense.
Yes. Yeah, he really is. To me, he was the first man that made pro wrestling believable.
Yeah. Yeah, I remember you saying once, I think you had said this on Matt Connerton Unleashed, that he was like your first hero. He was the first person you ever thought of as a hero.
He was. Him and Captain Kirk.
Yeah.
I also had a hero worship of Ric Flair, but Ric Flair's an asshole. And I met him once, and ever since then, I will not support Ric Flair in any way, shape, or form.
Yeah, I understand.
But they say never meet your heroes. Meeting Ric Flair is a prime example of that. Meeting Bret Hart and William Shatner, the exact opposite.
Yeah.
Of that. You should always meet your heroes because both of them were amazing. Bret, even there it is. Yes. I'm surprised I was able to make my hand into a fist because it was shaking.
Oh yeah, no kidding. Yeah.
And that is actually my Winged Eagle belt, the one right here that he's holding.
Yeah.
And he signed it. So
I can tell you that for me becoming a fan, and I've never met Bret, but for me becoming a fan, I was a big fan. When I first started watching wrestling, the Hart Foundation was there at that time, the WWF. So I was a fan. I became a fan quickly. I just thought they were so cool. And I really enjoyed their matches, but I also, the thing that I remember really vividly was, and I became an even bigger fan of Bret Hart when, during his solo career, and he winning the Intercontinental title, from Mr. Perfect at SummerSlam and everything that followed from that. And I really, he quickly became one of my favorites. But I have a very specific memory of how shocked I was. I was truly shocked when he won the world title from Ric Flair. Because so when that happened, that wasn't at a pay-per-view or anything. It wasn't even at a regular television taping. It was at a house show, but they did record it, obviously.
It
And I
was
remember,
a Coliseum video exclusive.
I was going to say, that's where I finally saw it. The first time I finally saw it on a Coliseum video rental. And I was like, because back in those days, that's, we didn't have YouTube yet and all this. So,
Right.
but I remember watching one of the syndicated shows, Channel 9, here in Manchester at that time. They would carry a show called Wrestling Challenge. And I remember turning on Wrestling Challenge, and it opens with Mean Gene Okerlund at a live event, and he's like, I would now like to welcome at this time the new World Wrestling Federation champion. And for a second, as he's saying that, in my mind, I'm thinking, Flair's had it for a little while now. They're still referring to him as the new champion. This is weird. I was confused for a half second, and then Bret's music hits and he comes out, and I'm like, holy shit, what the hell is going on here? But I was really happy because I'd become such a fan, and continued to be a fan. And I remember having conversations with friends about it. Like, I thought it was so cool after all those years of Hogan, because this is the thing. Not only was Bret Hart much more fun to watch in the ring because a far superior wrestler to Hulk Hogan and could put on really interesting matches, but I just thought, because people always talk about Hogan was this larger than life personality and Bret really wasn't. Bret, to me, though, I thought he had a ton of charisma as well as Hogan, just in a different kind of way, a different kind of charisma. And I always said, my exact words to one of my friends, I said, you know what? Bret Hart is cool in a way that Hogan never could be. This guy's just cool. He looks cool. He acts cool. He's got a vibe, and he is charismatic, and he's got a vibe. It's different than Hogan. Hogan's over the top and yelling and everything. Bret's a different kind of charisma, but he's cooler than Hogan ever was. That was how I felt.
That sums it up, but I'll try to give my own spin. What I liked about Bret is every Bret Hart match is different in its own way.
Yeah.
I've said it before on our short run here that you've seen one John Cena match, you've seen them all. And you can say that about a lot of wrestlers.
Yeah. And certainly Hogan.
Oh, God.
Yeah.
Oh, the first 8 years of WrestleMania. Oh, my goodness.
Yeah.
Oh, boy. Were they. I mean, man. That's another topic for another day.
Yeah.
But what Bret did is Bret Hart had you believing in him when he walked out. You looked at Bret and he was never out of a match. Think about this. WrestleMania 9, he takes on Yokozuna.
Mm-hmm.
Takes on Yokozuna. And he shouldn't have any shot in this. But through the storytelling with his body, they tell this story, and you believed it when he locked in the sharpshooter.
Yeah.
You're like, oh man, he's going to get Yokozuna to tap out, and then Fuji with the salt, and then that whole shit show of Hogan coming in, and that whole mess that I'm sure we'll touch base on that later in this episode. But even the big match he had before that at Royal Rumble against Razor Ramon.
Mm-hmm.
Razor is like 6'9". He towers over Bret, but you believed in Bret Hart. And that's something that's what makes a great wrestler, is that believability. Like, in heel wrestlers too, you believe that they're really a horrible person.
Mm-hmm.
that you detest or you love to detest, as you've so eloquently said it.
Yeah.
Um, and Bret had that. Even with the Hart Foundation, I mean, how could you not like these guys? You had the music, and I'm not going to do it justice, but I'm going to try. You had the bow, 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 and they came out in the big leather jackets, and you had the big badass powerhouse, the late Jim the Anvil Neidhart, and then you had the technician, the quick guy, the Bret the Hitman Hart, and they're wearing pink and they're wearing black, and you, and then the thing that drew me to Bret was the music
Yeah.
because it was just so awesome, and he always had the lighting to go with it. The
Oh yeah.
the pink strobe lights as he walked out, and the lights would hit those plastic mirrored shades just right, and just always walked in, and it was like watching James Dean walk into the to the soda bar,
Yeah.
or John Wayne getting ready to square up at the OK Corral,
Right.
uh or getting ready to match up in the shootist. There were times that you knew Bret Hart was like, the odds are stacked against me, but
Hmm.
I got this. And
Yeah.
that's that believability he had.
Well, the thing is, so Brett, like, it's I can't think of removing, leaving out, not even counting it, his match against Vince, or the match he had where, what was it? What did he win? The U.S. title on that last weird
Against
run
the
where they brought him back.
Miz.
Yeah, leaving those out of the equation, like Brett's actual wrestling career, like he's one of those people he couldn't. You often hear this said about Ric Flair, but Brett's one of those guys. He could have a great match with a broomstick. It's hard to imagine him having a bad match. He couldn't have a bad match. Even his match against Ric Flair, where he won the title, I know that Brett has complained over the years that he didn't think that match was as good as it should have been. And even Flair has acknowledged that because he had some sort of inner ear problem that was affecting his equilibrium. But I thought it
A
was a
week
good match.
it was, I think. Look, personal issues with Ric Flair's side.
Mm-hmm.
Ric Flair is a great in-ring worker.
Yes.
Man, could he work. And I'm
Yeah.
not ever going to take that away from Ric Flair.
Yeah.
What I will say is, yeah, that match is a massive letdown. I mean, in even their WCW match they had in 1998, it sold out.
Yeah.
Um, yeah, I mean, I will. This is one of the rare times I will go at Eric Bischoff. Going in and telling Bret the Hitman Hart and Ric Flair, you have 13 minutes, get it done.
Mm-hmm.
Are you out of your damn
You
mind?
think they needed more time? Is that?
I would have been like, listen, I would have told everyone else on that show, you all need to trim and cut because we're going to give these two 30 minutes.
Mm, yeah.
I would have had false finishes. I would have had pile drivers. I would have had Ric Flair's turnbuckle spot. I would have had Brett's getting whipped into the ropes chest first
Yeah.
multiple times. I would have had those two go balls out. And if they would have done that, I believe Brett's WCW run could have been somewhat different
Mm-hmm.
because he did take, rightfully so, a great deal of time off following the death of Owen.
Yeah.
Um, and that I'm not even gonna come at him for that because that's
Yeah.
understandable.
Yeah.
But I think the run leading up to Owen's death would have been so much better. And Ric Flair would have benefited because Ric Flair was really getting shortchanged in WCW at that time. So
Yeah. He could still
I
go
think
at that point.
he really could. And
Yeah.
I think like a lot of people just and it's crap like that discounted Ric Flair in those late WCW days.
Yeah.
Um, and uh, and to a degree, Bret. I mean, Bret had some high profile, but I Vince McMahon said to Bret, and Bret has written this in his book, and he said it in many interviews. He said Eric Bischoff doesn't know how to book a Bret the Hitman Hart.
Yeah.
And as great as Eric Bischoff is, I think that's very true. And
Yeah.
Eric will argue that he was given a broken Hitman, and I don't buy that. I don't I don't think Bret Hart was as broken as Eric Bischoff believes he was after the Montreal screw job and then after Owen.
Hmm.
Because the Bret Hart that I grew up idolizing wouldn't wouldn't let that affect his art. In the ring, s- someone once said, the wrestlers are artists. Bret Hart was Rembrandt. In the
Hmm.
in the ring was his canvas.
Yeah.
And that is one of the truest statements about him. You talk to guys who say what their best matches were. Who's who?
Oh yeah.
Uh
True. Stone Cold.
Kevin Stone Cold. You wouldn't have a Stone Cold Steve Austin if it wasn't for Bret the Hitman Hart.
Yep.
Absolutely. And Stone
Yep.
Cold has even said that.
Yes.
That
Oh yeah.
if Bret in a match that was inducted into the WWE Hall of Fame this year,
Yep.
making Bret Hart the only 3-time WWE Hall of Famer,
Hmm.
once as a single, once with the Hart Foundation, and now the first ever match inducted, rightfully so, the greatest WrestleMania match of all time, his I Quit match with Stone Cold Steve Austin. Bret got Stone Cold to that stratosphere.
Hmm. Oh yeah.
And I mean, Ric Flair even said in an interview with the clothing line Roots of Fight, said they asked him, "You have a match with Bret Hart. What do you call that?" And he goes, "A night off. Everything with Bret is so easy."
Yeah. Yeah.
And Kevin Nash has said so many times, everything Bret Hart does makes sense.
Yeah. Because Nash says it too, right? His Bret Hart gave him his best match.
Yeah.
Yeah.
He said, you know, who he goes, any other guy that's like 5'9", 6 foot comes to me and says, I want to give you a backbreaker. I'm going to look at him and say, you're out of your damn mind.
Yeah.
I'm 7 foot. You're not. He goes, Bret tells me that. All right, brother, we'll do it
Yeah.
because it's going to make sense.
Yes. Yep.
And even Razor Ramon said that Bret was one of the best workers he's ever been with. One,
Hmm.
two, three kid, X Pac
Yep.
says that Bret probably gave the office believability in it
Yeah.
on a Monday Night Raw match where, and it's the
I
littlest
remember that match
nuance.
vividly. Yeah. I remember watching that
Yes,
live on television. Yep.
I was captivated, and I
Yeah.
didn't think I would be going into it. But it's the littlest nuance early
Hmm.
in the match. This
I
is
know.
what makes this is
I,
what makes Bret so great.
I know where you're
Is
going. I know
one
exactly the
two
moment you're talking
three
about.
1 2 3 kid does an arm drag. Bret lands, rolls, sits on his backside, rubs his shoulder, and gives a wry little smile at the camera. I'm like, okay. And then tilts his
Yeah.
head and gets up like, I'm going to have a fight on my hands.
Yeah.
At that point,
Those
everyone
subtleties.
everyone believes that 1 2 3 kid can beat. I think at this time he was 1 time or 2 time WWE champion, but
Yeah.
he could beat the Bret Hart on this night.
Yeah.
That was that cinematic.
Well, that's how I've heard. That's how I've heard Brett describe it too. And I wanna talk too a little bit about not just his matches that were always so good, but his promos. I've always thought again underrated. Some of his early, I will acknowledge some of his early ones as babyface WWF champion were a little shaky, but overall I thought were good. But he got better as he got more confident. He got better and better over time. And by the time he had his heel run during his, Canada versus USA thing, he was knocking it out of the park. He became, during that period, one of the best promos in the business, in my opinion. His promos
I
were fantastic. Fantastic.
Let me start by saying Stu Hart ain't teaching promos in Stampede Wrestling.
Right, right.
And we should preface this that that's where Bret got his start in
Yes.
his dad's wrestling promotion, Stampede Wrestling in Canada, back in the territory days. His him and his brothers all wrestled for Stu.
Yeah.
There were
Yeah.
9 children in Hart House. Classically, all the boys became wrestlers, all the daughters married wrestlers. That's
Yeah.
how Jim the Anvil Neidhart and British Bulldog Davy Boy Smith became his brother in law.
9 children. Well, it's cold in Calgary, huh?
Yeah, you gotta warm up somehow.
That's right.
Yeah. Yeah. So, Stu wasn't Fritz von Erich to his boys.
Yeah.
But he didn't coddle them either.
Right.
You had to go through everything everyone else went through. Now did he give his boys preferential spots? I would say, as someone who's watched a lot of Stampede Wrestling through tape trading throughout the years, no, I don't think he did, because everything they got, they earned.
Yeah.
Whereas, I've heard the argument a lot. Who's the better family, the Von Erichs or the Harts? No disrespect here, but if you
Yeah.
say anything other than the Hart family, you're an idiot.
I
Full
think
stop.
if you're in
Here's
Texas,
why.
you're probably expected to say the Von Erichs, but otherwise, I mean, who is the more
Okay,
influential?
yeah.
Yeah, you don't
If
want
you're
you're
a
not going to walk
homer,
into a
yeah, you're
bar.
gonna.
You're not going to walk into a bar in Houston, Texas, and or Dallas and say, that
I
you think,
would.
well, you get your ass kicked
I
if you
don't.
do that.
I'd walk in. I would walk in wearing my Bret Hart hoodie, my Bret Hart T-shirt, and my Bret Hart socks, with my signed winged eagle on my shoulder, and say the Von Erichs ain't shit compared to the Hart family.
Yeah, don't ever do that, please.
I wouldn't care,
But I have to find a new
because
co-host.
I'm sure you'd have people lining
You're
up.
not getting out of there alive.
Melanie La Liberty would probably sign up.
That's true. Melanie would love to be a co-host on this show.
She would. I
Yes.
firmly believe that. But yeah,
Yes.
no disrespect to the Von Erichs.
No. Also
Intended there.
very important family. Well, as
Yes.
as they say at the beginning of Cody's entrance, as wrestling has more than one royal family.
Yeah. Yeah. And, I think the Hearts are, I think if you just look at the accolades alone and the names that have come out of not just the Hart family, but Stampede Wrestling and the Hart family dungeon, Chris Jericho trained there, Lance Storm trained there, um, Chris Chris Benoit. I have trouble saying his name.
Sure.
In reverence, because of everything with that.
Yeah, of course.
Owen, Davy Boy, Anvil, Dynamite Kid, Brian Pillman. Just all these great guys that came from there, and you know, and the sad thing is you could make the argument, God rest his soul, that Owen was better than Bret.
Yeah.
I I
From a purely technical standpoint, he probably was a little bit better, and he could do because he could do some of the aerial stuff that Brett couldn't do, and
and that's
yeah,
what I was just gonna say.
yeah,
That would be an argument I would listen to. Like
hmm
people talk about best in-ring worker, and I hear Shawn Michaels brought up quite a bit, and you
he's
want magic.
he's my number 3, by the way.
My number three is actually really old school. Harley Race.
Oh, no kidding. Yeah.
Yep.
We'll have to do a show about him sometime. You can teach me more about him.
Oh, Harley.
I mean, I know a lot about
I
him, but you know more.
I
Interesting
I
guy.
I have I heard over 5 hours of Harley Race stories from the man himself on a car ride.
Yeah,
So,
we'll have to do a show about Harley Race. Yeah,
he's man, probably the greatest tough guy professional wrestler.
mm,
Legit tough guy. If
yeah,
you were
no,
to
I believe
ask
that.
me, if you were to ask me, Eric, you select three pro wrestlers in their prime to come with you in a bar fight. Who would you take? Number one, Harley Race.
Yeah,
No questions asked. Number two, probably Minoru Suzuki.
yeah.
Three, Meng.
Oh, yeah, Ming's a good choice. Um,
But I
but
digress.
yeah, you were saying though about Shawn Michaels, and I
When
derailed you. I
those
think.
two got together, it was magic. And why
Yes,
it was magic, in my opinion, and God damn it, we were robbed. We were robbed of so many more great moments we could have had with those two.
I know.
Uh, oh my goodness.
Yeah,
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 just it hurts me. It hurts my soul just talking about it.
yeah.
Um, but why it worked, why it was so great, and I think Sean is his greatest rival. Even removing all the backstage drama, throw
hmm
that out. Sean
Yeah,
is his greatest rival because Sean was the showman.
hmm
Sean was the entertainer. Bret
yeah,
was the workman. Bret was the guy that I would say Bret probably called all their matches.
hmm
And man,
Sean has said that, hasn't he? Didn't Sean even say that in an
Sean
interview? I
has
think.
said that a lot of the matches, Bret, they actually have said that they had 30 additional minutes of stuff from the Iron Man match
Yeah,
that they ran out of time.
yeah, yeah,
And it's like, wait. Another masterpiece. We could have gotten 30 additional minutes.
yeah,
Sign me up.
yeah.
I would have watched a 90-plus minute Bret Hart Shawn Michaels match.
Sure, sure.
No questions asked.
Yeah, yeah. Absolutely,
I mean,
absolutely.
and that's another thing I remember is I remember when the Iron Man match was first announced. My friends and I are like, what are we going to do for 60 minutes?
Yeah,
How dare we doubt those two?
I know. I know. If anyone could pull that off, yeah.
It,
Um,
it, I remember it didn't. I remember watching it live on pay-per-view, and it didn't even. It didn't even feel like 60 minutes.
right.
You're watching it, and you're not even paying attention to the little scoreboard they had in the lower right-hand corner.
Yeah.
BH and SM with the time ticking down. You're watching these two.
Yep.
And just, I remember the house I was watching it in was split, half Sean, half Bret. In those last, I think it was 45 seconds that Sean is in the sharpshooter.
Yeah.
Oh man, you would have thought that there was a murder. You have half of them yelling, no, 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 and everyone like, oh yes, yes,
Yeah.
yes.
Well,
Just
well, and that was in the days too, because you talk about the split crowd at that time. You didn't see often. You saw it, but you didn't see often babyface versus babyface in a WrestleMania main event. You usually saw babyface versus heel. Now, you see babyface and, all babyface and all heel matches all the time. But at that time, it was still fairly unusual. So you could have a split crowd like that.
Yes, you could. And I think that really kind of set the precedent that the lines were starting to blur in
Yeah.
pro wrestling.
Yes.
That you didn't need to find baby faces, you didn't need to find heels. That the audience was smart enough to decide who they rooted for.
Yeah. Yeah.
And
Um,
I think that that's a credit again to Bret and Shawn.
yeah. I remember their match prior to that for the Intercontinental title, the year that they wrestled at Survivor Series, and I was very, very impressed with that.
That was for the WWF title, actually.
Oh, it was. Oh, it
Yeah.
was. I'm sorry. Yes.
Yep. Shawn
Um,
was Intercontinental Champion.
oh,
Bret was
that's right.
WWF
How could I?
Champion.
How could I forget that? Yes, of course. It was
And
title. It was title for
Bret's,
title. Yeah.
yes. And you know what set that up? Again, I'm going to give Shawn credit here. Bret's doing an interview on one of the 2 episodes of Saturday Night's Main Event on Fox.
Mm-hmm.
And he's talking, and Shawn Michaels, the Heartbreak Kid, comes in and just blows up his interview and
Yep.
goes, "You know who I just beat? Your brother-in-law, Davey Boy Smith, who beat you at SummerSlam."
Yep.
And you're like, and Bret just plays it off so cool.
Yep.
But that, and I believe that was a last minute change to go with Bret and Shawn in the main event of Survivor Series, because I think the original plan, and I could be wrong, I think the original plan was for a Flair rematch.
Oh, okay.
But they did the angle with Razor Ramon and Ric Flair versus Kurt Hennig and Macho Man.
Yes.
They went that route instead.
Yeah,
I
because
believe.
everything was kind of getting turned upside down because of
Well, because
Warrior.
Rick had given his notice too.
That, yeah, between that and the
Rick
Ultimate
was,
Warrior leaving, and
well, Warrior.
because that was
Wa-
also when it was supposed to be Warrior and Savage, right? Yeah, it was supposed to be Warrior and Savage,
I think
and then they had
no.
to swap out Warrior for Hennig
Yes, yes,
because
yes. That
that's the
is.
same, because that was the same Saturday night's main event where on Fox, right? They were doing it on Fox at that point, or was it Friday night? Was it
It
Friday
was
or
on
Saturday?
Fox. It
It was
was
on Fox,
Saturday.
and that's the one where at the end of it, at the very they left us with a cliffhanger, which was also very rare at that time. But they actually
Yep.
left us with a cliffhanger where Bobby Heenan, he's on the phone, he's on a phone with a cord on it at the announce booth, which I'm pretty sure was in front of a green screen. But he turns to, because it wasn't live. It was taped, and he turns to Vince and he said, "I just found out from a source that Warrior and Savage will not go to the ring together at Survivor Series." And then that's it, and that's how the show ends. And they literally left us with a cliffhanger, which was pretty unusual at that time, but pretty cool.
Yeah, it really was. And I just thank you for reminding me of that. But also, we got to go back a little bit deeper, because Warrior is the one who injured Flair. That with the equilibrium issue.
Oh yeah,
That is legitimate. That happened,
yeah,
I want to say, a month prior at a house show. Warrior gave him a clothesline and hit him
yeah,
on the probably gave him a concussion, now knowing what we know about concussions
yeah.
and everything. So that is legitimate. I've read from multiple sources that Flair never trusted him again.
Can't blame him.
And no. And I've never seen the clothesline, but watching Warriors matches, he was rough. Like, yeah.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. Um,
So yeah, I look in. So yeah, I think having Bret and Shawn do that, and they had the first ladder match in WWE history.
yep, yep.
Everyone
Okay.
forget. Everyone says Shawn and Razor had the first ladder match, and they had the first televised one, the first major event one.
I was going to say, if you're a casual fan, yeah,
Yeah, it was
but
the first,
yeah,
but Bret and Shawn had the first one that was released on Coliseum Home Video. I think it was a European tour when they had it.
yeah. The
And
only reason I knew about it was because one of the Apter mags had an article about it, and I was like, "Oh, what is this?" I never saw this on
and
TV.
knowing what we know now, that the ladder match came from Stampede Wrestling.
Yeah,
Bret is the one who gave Vince the idea for it.
yeah. And then
It,
apparently he was kind of pissed that at WrestleMania it was
he
Shawn
wanted
and Razor.
my understanding is he wanted to do it with Shawn on a big
Yeah,
stage
yeah,
because he thought it could make money, and
yeah,
Vince didn't think it could. Vince, it would back up the Brinks truck, print money,
yeah,
like man. So yeah, and Brett even has said that he gave Shawn and Razor ideas for spots they could do in that
yeah,
match that they ended up taking.
yeah, yeah,
Um, uh, and although I don't think he gave them the best idea, using the ladder as like a participant in the match, I believe those two came up with that on
yeah,
their own.
yeah,
Or if you listen to the King of Bros, he
bro.
he bro, he told them that, bro.
He who shall not be named.
That moron. What, we know so many trashy people from New York. Goodness gracious.
I know. Yes. Um, some people listening will know the reference,
Oh
but
yeah. Especially in
that
Poughkeepsie.
individual is also a wrestling fan, by the way. So not all wrestling fans are good people.
Not all
Not all.
wrestling fans are smart either. That
Right, right, yeah. Only some of us.
yeah.
We're in the elite.
Well, depending on who you talk to, in regards to me, some people might disagree with the smart part, or the elite part, or even good person part. We'll move on.
I have a question. Is there anything about Bret that you would criticize?
Oh man.
Constructively, obviously, because he's one of your heroes, as he is one of mine. I have some constructive criticisms of him,
I
uh, but
I
I'm curious
think
if you do.
this is hard for me because I'm
Mm.
actually going to share this podcast to him on Twitter. I
Oh,
don't think
cool.
anything will come out of it, but I'm going to, and on Instagram.
Yeah, yeah,
Because I would, and if we get something out of it, awesome, even
yeah.
better.
Of course, of course.
Um, my criticism of Brett, and here is he's given himself this criticism, so I don't feel bad giving it to him. I think not in these words. I think sometimes Brett took himself too seriously,
Agreed.
and it affected the ability to make money. I
Yes,
again, I'm not going to sit here and throw the Shawn Michaels situation in that. I think both of them are at fault, and I also think Vince McMahon planted a lot of seeds.
yes,
So yeah, I think Vince planted a got dissension there that just blew up,
hmm yeah.
and Sean has even said that he was not the best person then.
Oh yeah. Oh, he was
So
a yeah. I mean, by all accounts, he's a very different person today than he was back then.
yes, um,
Completely different, or he wouldn't be in the position that he is in now. Otherwise,
right,
presumably, yeah,
absolutely agree, and
yeah, yeah,
I I I think all accounts he's a great person now. So
yeah.
yeah, really, but I think that that's a big thing with Brett. I think there are times he took himself too seriously.
Hmm.
Um, and it hurt business. Um, but that would be my criticism of it. But you also, again, now I'm going to play devil's advocate. You, in this business, I think you have to. You have to protect yourself because the
Yeah.
promoter ain't going to do it.
Right. True. You got to protect your spot, as they say.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I don't I don't have an issue with it per se. I think it contributed to some things
Hmm.
happening.
Hmm.
But then I look at other things that happened in his career, and I'm like, again, he's got to protect himself. Look at what Hogan did to him.
Yeah. Yeah.
I mean, Hogan lied to him and could have deep sixed him as being a viable top guy if it wasn't for Bret's hard work to get back to the top.
Right. Right.
So, so yeah, I mean, I understand it and I get it. But that would be my one thing, and I feel bad even saying that. I'm sorry, Brett. Don't hate me.
No, but I think in a way, how should I say this? I think it makes you more of a fan if you're able to constructively criticize something maybe you don't agree with than you are if you're just going to blindly say I love everything about this person and everything they ever did in their career and there's nothing I would ever pick apart. You know what I mean? Because if you're thinking critically about this person whom you're a fan of and thinking critically about their career and really analyzing it, and have actual thoughts and feelings about what you like and what you don't like and what they did that you like and what maybe you think they should have done differently. I mean, that shows that you're really invested in what they're doing. It's like, it's not with wrestling, but with Kiss. Kiss is my favorite band, but I have no problem criticizing things that they've done or certain albums they made that I didn't like as much as others or whatever. I've never had a problem being very critical of Kiss uh, on certain
Right.
things or being
I,
critical of, or Gene Simmons said this or did this. You know what I mean? I think if you're truly a fan, you should be able to, and you shouldn't have to be sorry. You shouldn't feel bad about, again, thinking critically and having opinions and not just going along with whatever you think you should feel, but it's saying, okay, well, here's something I think Bret maybe didn't quite get right. I think that's valid, and I think that makes you more of a fan, in my opinion.
my issue is, how do you criticize a painting by Van Gogh? How do
Yeah,
you criticize a film performance by Robert De Niro?
sure.
Yeah, these, like, they're perfect artists. How do you criticize a table dance by Jenna Jameson? Um, they're artists in their craft.
Sure. But yeah, but on the other hand, it is all art, and art is subjective. It's not objective, it's subjective, and so you're allowed
But
to.
I'm saying, like, I don't want to be that person that walks into an art gallery and is sitting there just like, oh, look at this painting, it's so perfect, but it's got this little dent in it. That's how I feel I am if I by
uh,
criticizing Bret Hart, is everything he did was just so perfect. How do
yeah,
we, like, what can I find? So I had to think about it. That's a good question.
but I will, so I'll tell you what I think, and again, whatever I say, whatever criticisms I have of Bret, again, purely constructive. I love Bret Hart. Um, my second favorite of all time. Uh, but I do think, and this kind of maybe piggybacks on what you said a little bit, because I absolutely agree, and I think a lot of people would agree. Bret did take himself. I think Bret has even hinted in a couple of interviews that maybe he recognizes that he took himself too seriously at times. And I think that I think and you referenced, not directly, but you alluded to Montreal and the situation there with Sean and Vince, and that's something I've always been a bit critical of. I mean, personally, honestly, and I think you and I will disagree on this fine point specifically. I thought Bret should have done the job and dropped the belt, and that's it. Personally,
No.
yeah, I know, I knew you were going to disagree with me on that. I just think that
No.
he should have risen above. I understand his reasons and his misgivings and all of it, but I think he should have just risen above it and said, "All right, well, this is I'm leaving. I'm out of here. I'm going to go to WCW. I'm going to be great there. I'm going to shove it up Vince's ass." You know, whatever. But I just think that I think that would have been. Don't get me wrong. I'm glad everything played out the way that it did because
I'm not.
I am because I don't know if in 2025 if we'd be sitting here with wrestling being as big as it is today without, you know, the butterfly effect. If one thing changes, like if all that hadn't happened and Bret had stayed and everything had been happy,
Okay,
maybe
yeah.
maybe we never would have gotten the Mr. McMahon character. Maybe we
No, we
never would
wouldn't
have
have.
gotten the Attitude Era. Maybe WWE wouldn't be in business today for all we know. Who knows, right?
Right.
So
Um,
things have a weird way of playing out. I mean, there's all kinds of examples of that in wrestling, right? Like Triple H getting in trouble for the curtain call led to him not winning King of the Ring that year like he was supposed to. So instead it was Stone Cold, which led to the Austin 316 promo, which led to everything that came from that.
yup.
You know what I mean? There's so many
And
examples of that in wrestling. It's kind of fascinating if you think about it. But
y- y-
so
yeah,
I'm glad Montreal happened.
I
You know what
guess
I
in that
mean?
I guess in that aspect, yes, you're
Yeah.
right.
Yeah.
Here's what I'm going to disagree with you on.
Yeah.
The one, knowing what we know today, and there was additional information we didn't know that was released in the Mr. McMahon documentary
Yes.
about Montreal. And
Yeah.
I think now's a good time to talk about it because sadly, you can't talk about Bret without Montreal.
Yeah.
Um, I think the thing is, one, Bret went up to Sean, and I've said this, there are only two people whose stories have never changed regarding Montreal: Jim Cornette, Bret the Hitman Hart.
Yeah.
Neither one of their stories have changed. Even
Right.
Jim Ross and Bruce Pritchard, who respect both of them, and quick well wishes and prayers for a swift recovery to Jim Ross.
I saw that cancer diagnosis, colon cancer. Yeah.
Yes. So thoughts and well wishes and prayers with good old JR
Yeah.
as he battles this. I totally spaced that. Um, but what I'm going to say is Bret went to Sean and said, "We're going to do it at Survivor Series. I have no problem putting you over. I would never do anything to hurt you in the ring." And Sean said, "I can't say the same for you." At that point, Bret was within his rights to say, "No way am I doing this."
Mhm.
And think about this: everything Bret Hart had done for that company leading up to that,
Yeah.
he had never said no to doing a job,
Yeah.
never said no to
True.
anything.
True.
He said no to that.
Yeah.
And what we found out in the Mr. McMahon documentary is Vince's complaint about the whole thing. All these many, many years later, this was just made public knowledge. Vince has always said, "I was afraid he was going to do an Alundra Blaze and take the belt to WCW and drop it in the garbage can and disrespect our title. And that can happen to the women's title, but it can't happen to our belt."
Mm.
Never would
Yeah.
have happened because Bret was still under contract
Right. He wouldn't
to,
have been legally able to do that anyway. Yeah.
and Eric Bischoff was getting hit with lawsuits. Well, not Eric Bischoff directly, Turner, by WWE, and they wanted no part of lawsuits from Titan Sports
Yeah.
after that. So that would never have happened.
Yeah.
So Vince knew that.
Yeah.
Bret gave a 30-day notice,
Yeah.
or I think it was a 60-day. It was either a 30, 60, or 90-day notice that he was breaking his contract. Regardless, the contract went through until December 12th. They
Yeah.
could have had Bret drop the title at any point.
Well, that's a fair point. They should, and that's what they should have done to
At
avoid all the
any
mess.
point
Yeah,
following that. And I agree with you on the butterfly effect scenario, and everything you said is spot on.
yeah,
I'm saying just from the standpoint of being a Bret Hart fan,
yeah,
that there was a better way to do that. And that now knowing uh, a year ago or 2 years ago, whenever the documentary was released, and this just shows what a stand up guy Bret the Hitman Hart is. He never wrote about that in his book.
right.
He's never said that in an interview. He is that wasn't even in the documentary Wrestling with Shadows.
Yeah,
That was uncovered by a random journalist who had a copy of Bret Hart's contract.
yeah,
So all these people out here saying all Bret has done is whine about Montreal. How many times have you been screwed over by a job? How many times have you been screwed over by a place that you've given your heart and your soul to? Let alone your body and your blood and your sweat to.
yeah.
No. There is no, again, butterfly effect notwithstanding. There is no reason you can give me, especially knowing that new piece of information, that makes what Vincent Kennedy McMahon did that night justifiable.
All right, I am going to offer a counterpoint. Oh, and I don't want to be in the position of defending Vince, especially with all that we know now. Oh my God.
Right.
But trying to put myself in his position. So I agree. I mean, you're right. They could have avoided it all by having Bret drop the belt to some. I mean, I remember Bret, I think it was in Wrestling with Shadows, he even says, I'll drop it to the Brooklyn Brawler. I don't care. I'm just not dropping it to Sean in Canada. Um,
Right.
if Bret had gotten here's the problem for Vince. Vince is getting his ass kicked by WCW. Obviously, the company's struggling for money because they can't honor Bret's contract. He told Bret, we're going to intentionally breach the contract if we have to, because we have no other option, financial peril, all of that. Now, so Vince is already getting his ass kicked. And now if he capitulates to Bret, because Bret doesn't want to drop the belt to Shawn in Montreal, now everyone, the people who Vince has under contract still, who are still with WWE, who are probably going to go to WCW as soon as they can, as soon as that Brinks truck pulls up in front of their driveway, and they have a chance to. Now they know. Now Vince has shown weakness. Now Vince has shown, if you've got him backed into a corner, oh, Vince isn't so tough after all. You can push him around. And he let Bret push him around. Now I can push him around too. I can put my foot down and say, no, Vince, I'm not doing this. See that, and I think Vince, from his perspective, felt like I have to do this because I can't look weak. And Eric, you got to admit, he would look weak, wouldn't he, to the rest of the guys in the company if he had given Bret his way. What would that have done in terms of Vince's ability to run the company at that point?
One key fact we're missing from that.
Mm-hmm.
And I understand your thought process there.
Yeah.
I'm not disagreeing, but there's a key fact. Bret had something in his contract no one else had.
I'm glad you brought that up.
He had creative control over his final 30 days. And
yes.
So
but
if people want to say, well, he pushed Vince around, no, Vince was still the contract is the contract.
Yeah.
They breached it. Bret could opt out. Bret did. But the terms of the contract are still there. Bret's just opting out, giving the company an out. But the terms over everything else are still valid. The 30 days of creative control. Bret had that. If you don't think the boys in the locker room knew that Bret had that, I
Oh,
would.
everybody
Oh,
knew. Yeah.
yeah,
Because
everyone knew.
that was being reported at the time. That was a big part of the story. Another counterpoint, though, if I'm not mistaken, if I'm remembering it correctly, it was described as, I think this is the exact wording in the contract, but I could be wrong. Reasonable creative control. Reasonable meaning, like Bret couldn't say, for example, he couldn't demand anything that would be deemed unreasonable. So there's some ambiguity there. So Bret couldn't go to Vince and say,
Some.
well, Bret couldn't go to Vince and say, so I have creative control over my last 30 days. So in the last 30 days, I'm not only keeping the world title, but I'm also going to win the Intercontinental title, and I'm going to have a tag partner and win the. I have creative control, so I can do that. Reasonable creative control, meaning that. Well, I mean, again, that's ambiguous, right? I wish we had a lawyer with us on the show,
Yeah,
but
that's very ambiguous.
that's very ambiguous. So then, if that's in there, if that word reasonable appears there, and again, I'm not a lawyer, I have no legal background at all, but it seems to me like, so then you then get into a debate about, well, what is reasonable?
Is
Is
it
it,
reasonable? Is it reasonable to have a Canadian hero lose to his greatest rival in Canada? Is that reasonable?
I don't know. Well, that's the thing.
That
That's the thing.
exactly is so. No, I get
But
it.
from the other side, Eric, is it reasonable, quote unquote reasonable, for the champion to be able to tell the promoter, no, I'm not losing the title on that date in that
It
city on that
is
event?
if
Is
he
that
gives.
reasonable?
It is if he gives an alternative that is feasible.
Is it?
He gave an alternative. He
Yeah.
said you could have me drop it to Shamrock. Now,
True. Yeah.
to prove I'm not all Team Bret here, Bret's
Yeah.
idea, I'll just go next night to Ottawa and drop the title to you and give it up.
Oh, I hated
No,
that idea. Oh, that idea was awful.
that's
Oh,
absolutely awful. You can't have your champion come in and be like, I'm out. I'm going
oh
to
yeah, that would have
WCW.
been,
Here's
yeah.
your belt.
Yeah, because
No,
because I know that was one of the alternatives Bret offered, and that would have been horrible.
no. There, you have to drop it to somebody.
Yeah,
Now,
yeah.
do I again? Now I go back. Sean, no, because Sean did not show Bret the respect that he deserved.
No, I agree there. I agree with that.
And so then we circle back to what do we do?
Yeah.
Um, I think I think Vince knew the whole time what he was going to do. He just had to get key players on board with it. And look, people can sit here and say, I came up with the idea with the Montreal screw job. I came up with the idea for it. I came up with the idea for it. I think Vince knew by hook or by crook, Bret Hart is not winning this match. He just needed to find out the way.
Oh yeah. No, I
And
agree. Yeah, yeah,
to find out the way, he needed someone who knew the business of professional wrestling like the back of his hand. That person is not the king of bros as as he says constantly.
right.
It had to be a historian of the business. So the two people I'm willing to give credence to that they came up with it is Jim Cornette
Hmm.
and Paul Triple H Levesque.
Well, Cornette did claim, right, that he came up with it.
Cornette claimed on Dark Side of the Ring that yes, he
Yeah.
came up with screwing him over.
And Cornette,
Based
we've never known Cornette to be dishonest, right?
no, no,
Yeah.
but I
So I
also
believe him.
believe Triple H in a meeting said if he won't do business, then fuck him, we'll do business for him.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I think that those two, I think Jim Cornette came up with the idea. And this is me theorizing here. I
Yeah.
think Jim Cornette came up with the idea and exactly how we're going to do it. And I think Triple H galvanized it.
Yeah.
To hear one of the boys in the locker room say, ask him,
Good point.
let's do business for him, I think locked it in. And Vince was
I
like, this is what we're gonna do.
I think you're onto
Uh
something there. I think that makes a lot of
I,
sense.
so I don't think I'll say his name, Vince Russo. You couldn't come up with this if it was spelled out for you.
Right.
No, no. It had to be someone Bret respected to propose. We're gonna let Sean put you in your finish.
Hmm.
So Pat Patterson had to be in the know on this. Pat Patterson had to know.
Yeah.
So I agree. The circle was small.
Oh yeah. Yeah.
I think what we have now is that Sean knew, Hunter knew, Vince knew, Patterson knew, and Jim Cornette knew. I think those are the five. I don't think Jim Ross knew, and I don't think Bruce Pritchard knew. And I think Vince Russo was just trying to figure out what he was doing in Canada. So he had no clue. Um, so yeah, I mean, I think those are the five that knew.
There are people who to this day claim that, and you and I, we're not people who are. Yeah, I can tell by the look on your face. You already know what I'm about to ask you. You and I
It
are not.
is not a work.
You and I are not people who are susceptible to conspiracy theories, but so I don't know. I don't believe it's a work either, and I never have. There is there is one piece of evidence.
I know. I think I know where you're going with this because
Oh,
I I think I know what you're going to bring up, but I
okay.
want to hear it.
Okay. The one thing that I've always wondered about, and we did talk earlier about how some, the butterfly effect, and sometimes in wrestling things just work out. And a lot of things worked out in the aftermath of this. But one of the things that worked out really well is that Wrestling with Shadows documentary that you mentioned earlier, a documentary about Bret Hart in the, at that time, still the WWF, which I'm sure a lot of people would have liked to have seen and been interested in, people who are fans of Bret Hart. Otherwise, it might not have a huge appeal to a large audience, but if you're a fan of Bret Hart and you're a wrestling fan, you might like to see this. And it just so happens
You're not
that,
going where I thought you were going,
oh,
by
I'll
the
be curious
way.
afterward to hear where you thought I was going. But it just so happens that this documentary has a pretty climactic ending that no one anticipated or thought or could have possibly seen coming. But it all just works out so perfectly for this documentary that it ends with the Montreal screw job. And again, just to be clear, I'm not saying that I think that means it might have been a work. I don't think it was a work. I think that was just a very, very happy accident and coincidence. But my God, the guy, what's his name? Barry something? No, Barry did no,
Paul
the guy,
J.
who is it?
Paul J. is the director
Oh,
of
Paul J.
wrestling.
Paul J might be the luckiest son of a bitch who ever made a documentary to have that work out that way. And again, I do believe it was a coincidence and it just happened to work out that way. But my God, what a lucky guy he is to have that work out that way. So I will say that. So
Okay.
that's the one thing that always kind of made me go, yeah, that is interesting.
And that's such a good point. But you've opened the door for me to break into my mental wrestling Rolodex in my head.
Yeah.
I have a counter to that.
Okay.
So, Conrad Thompson brought that up to Bruce Pritchard.
Oh, he did.
Yes.
Okay.
In one
I
of
haven't
the
listened to those in
episodes
a while.
where they talked about either Survivor Series 97 as an event or just Bret Hart in 97. It was one of them.
Yeah.
And Bruce said this, and it makes a lot of sense if you think about it. When WWE gives you credentials, they give it to you for an event or for a specific amount of time.
Yeah.
When they were approached about the documentary, they were told it would be a 1 year shoot.
Okay.
So originally, the documentary was going to end with Bret Hart faxing his letter.
Oh, I remember
But
that scene. Yeah.
what happens after that, they stopped filming.
Yeah.
But Bret called Paul Jay. And Paul Jay has this comes from Paul Jay in interviews.
Yeah.
Bret had called Paul Jay and said, "Hey, there's something interesting going on here.
I didn't know this. I didn't know this part.
There's something interesting going on here." I'm greatly paraphrasing here.
Yeah.
There's an issue with my last night. They want me to do this with Sean. I don't want to do this. It's going to be my last night in WWE. Do you want to come film? Well, lo and behold, we still have these press passes that they never revoked.
I'll be damned.
Sure, we'll fly up and film this. And over time, things have gotten more contentious.
Yeah.
So,
I see. I didn't know about this. I didn't know about the phone call from Bret to Paul Jay. I never knew that. That's
um,
okay. Well, that does explain a lot, though.
so they get there at the Molson Center in Montreal,
Yeah.
and the people at Montreal let them in because they're good credentials.
Yeah.
What are you going to say? No or wait? They didn't know
Right.
what was going on, so they just let them in.
Yeah.
And by the time everyone figured out, they'd already filmed footage.
Yeah.
They never knew Bret was bugged going into the meeting with Vince.
Yeah. They didn't know he was wearing a wire.
Yeah.
For the documentary. And why would they? Why would anyone suspect that even,
I didn't
nobody's patting him down. They're not in the mafia.
My understanding is that they didn't even know the documentary crew was there when they had that meeting with Vince.
Wow.
They had no clue.
Well, I can see that happening though. It's busy. There's a lot of people around.
Exactly.
Yeah.
We talked about it at the beginning.
Yeah. Yeah.
And now as a promoter, you have this giant cluster to work out.
Yeah.
Knowing that you're screwing over quite possibly your greatest superstar ever, not named Hulk Hogan.
Yeah.
You're going to be a villain. You're going to be hated. You don't know the effect it's going to have on your business. Why are you paying attention to, no offense to Paul Jay, this rinky-dink production crew?
Yeah. Yeah.
So, yeah, that's exactly why it happened.
That makes sense.
It was pure dumb luck that they still had the credentials.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay. Well, that really explains that. Now, where did you, because you said you thought you knew where I was going. Where did you think I was going?
One of my favorite scenes in Dark Side of the Ring happens at the end of the Montreal episode. And it's Scott Hall breaking down the finish and why he thinks it's a work.
Okay.
And I thought you were going to reference that moment as someone who knows Sean very well, is one of the smartest minds, the late, great Scott Hall, Razor Ramon, one of the greatest minds in the business, can break it down like that. It's got to be a work.
Huh.
And the one thing I will say that Scott did not bring up.
Yeah.
And I never noticed this till I watched the Sean and Bret rivalries WWE home video release. But Sean goes to put the sharpshooter on wrong.
Yeah.
He uses the wrong leg, and Bret tells him switch legs.
Yep.
And you see Sean switch legs.
Yeah.
To put it on right.
Yeah.
So yeah.
But I don't understand. Yeah, and I remember him saying that when I watched that Dark Side of the Ring, but I don't understand because Bret's even talked about that. Like, yeah, Sean didn't even know how to put the sharpshooter on the right way. I had to help him. Like, what is that? I mean,
I again, again, I thought you were going to reference the fact that if
Yeah,
Scott
no.
Hall might know something we don't because of his friendship with Sean and
Yeah.
Hunter.
Yeah. Nah.
And his ability to break it down like he did. But my
Nah.
point was going to be he missed that key point. If it was a work, why would Bret, if
Oh, I see what you're saying.
if Bret knew that he was about to get screwed and just was going to go out and didn't care,
Right.
he wouldn't have told Sean, "You're
Right.
putting it
You're
on
right.
wrong."
You're
He
right.
would have
Okay.
let
So that's
Sean
what,
just fall on his face.
and that's the part that Scott Hall missed. Okay. I see what you're saying.
Yeah,
Yeah. Yeah.
Scott
No,
totally
you're right.
missed that.
You're right. Yeah. No, that's a good point. That's a good point. Um, Eric, we are past the 2 hour mark. So we're live. We decided to stream this live. Obviously, it's going to go up on the podcast networks. We had talked about before we started the stream, because we usually, we usually talk for a few minutes and then we end the recording and talk a little bit after, because we're doing this live. When I end the stream, that I think it's going to disconnect us completely.
Right.
But so we're kind of doing this on the fly. So I'm going to put you on. I have an idea, but I'm kind of putting you on the spot here.
Okay.
I'd like to call an audible on something. So we had talked before starting this today about what we were going to do next week for our main subject, because every week we have a different
Yes.
subject. And we had talked about a specific, I won't say what it was, but we had something specific in mind that I definitely do want to do in the future, but I don't think we should do it next week. I think next week we should, this is what I would propose. I think we should do a part 2 on Bret, because I would really like to get into his WCW run.
I totally agree.
Yeah, I don't want to leave the subject of Bret without talking about WCW.
Right.
The good and the bad. And there actually was some good.
There was some really good in WCW.
His promo calling El Dandy a jam up guy, a term I'd never even heard before, was one of my favorite Bret Hart moments in WCW. I'm not even kidding. Like, I love that. There's so much to talk about there. So
2 words: Bill Goldberg.
I know the promo you're talking about. Yep. There's some really good stuff there. So I think next week we should do part 2 of Bret.
You know what? I sign off on it. I would love to do part 2 on Bret. I think, doing the WCW stuff, I think will, and we, of course, if in doing, I like the idea because then we're able to talk more about Owen,
Yeah,
because
that's true too. Yeah.
then, I mean, because they do kind of tie in together.
Yes. You're right. Absolutely. Absolutely.
So yeah, I really, because if you talk about Bret, I think you gotta talk about Owen, and
Yeah.
I will make a promise, and I'm calling an audible now. We will do an episode dedicated to Owen Hart
Oh,
at some
absolutely.
point, because
Absolutely. We've got
we
to. Yeah.
absolutely have to.
Yeah.
You know, and probably the Hart family in general should get their own at some point, because
Oh, yeah.
you got to talk about Stampede. The problem, and I'll share this with our audience, is there isn't a lot of real great footage of Stampede wrestling
Mm.
out there. WWE Network, I don't believe, has any of it on the
Oh,
network,
okay.
which is unfortunate because there's a lot of great stuff. Um, on one of the Bret Hart Blu-ray releases, there's a great 2 out of 3 falls match he had with Dynamite Kid on there, but there's stuff missing from it.
Mm.
So
Okay.
that's unfortunate. It's
Yeah.
just what they use to tape
Yeah.
in Canada. So
Yeah. Yeah. All right.
so yeah, no, I totally sign off on that. I think doing a part 2 on Bret is very fitting, because you can't really encompass his career in a 2-hour bow.
Yeah. Yeah. Agreed. Agreed. Well, this has been wonderful as always, of course. And
Any more comments from the fans, or
no, it's been quiet in there. I don't know. Again, I don't know how many people are watching or listening live.
you know what? Screw it. Next week we'll do it live again.
We'll do it live. We'll do it live.
Yeah, fuck it. We'll do it live.
I'll write it and we'll do it live.
Yup. Absolutely. We'll do it live again. That way we can build it up and have an audience. Uh,
Yes.
and have people come in and talk about Brett, or say what you feel.
Yeah.
I mean, if now I will say this: if you're negative on Brett the Hitman Hart, I'm not responsible for what I say. I am not. You, man, we might get kicked off the internet
We
next
might.
week.
It happens to people. They get
It does. They get suspended nine
uh,
times
hmm
off of you male genitalia or something, or whatever
yeah.
they call it.
Yeah.
Uh Zuckerberg suspends them, and a lot of it is because they're just an uneducated moron.
Yeah.
But no, you people will be at fault for talking negatively about Brett the Hitman Hart.
Yes. Understood.
This will
Understood.
not be my fault.
All right, fair enough. Fair enough. Well, very good. So, with that disclaimer, we will again please like us, follow us on social media. Tough Bumps. We're everywhere, and that'll do it for this
Someone tag
edition.
Joey. Someone tag Joey Janela.
What'd you just say? You want to fight Joey Janela? Is that what you said?
Fight Joey Janela. Oh, man, I have a gimp arm right now from work, so mm, I'd still fight him.
Yeah.
One arm and all. With
All
my
right.
arm in a sling, I would fight Joey Janela. Uh,
Nice.
because Joey's big into sympathy, apparently.
Apparently.
Apparently, it's got to be about him and feeling sorry for Joey,
Yeah.
not and stand up for him. I need someone to stand up for me. Who will stand up for Eric?
Yes. Let's get that trending. Hashtag who will stand up for Eric?
Who will stand up for Eric P? Because there's a lot of Erics
That's
out there.
true. There
We
are a
don't
lot of
just want to
Erics.
stand up for any old Eric. We
Yeah.
want to stand up for me.
Yeah.
Someone stand up for me, damn it. I'd fight Joey Janela.
Fair enough. The
And
challenge has been made.
I won't even need Kratom to do it.
Good. Well, that's a good thing, I guess. Okay. Well,
I'm
fair
just
enough.
stupid.
Fair enough. All right. That concludes episode 4 of Tough Bumps, and we'll talk to y'all next week. Thanks, Eric.
Thank you. Bye, guys.
Tough bumps we take, we rise again. Blood and grit, it's how we begin. Mac and Eric fire up the flame. Wrestling lives on the Tough Bumps name.